It takes a lot of courage to do what we are doing, to stand our ground in faith as we watch the virus continue to slowly spread around us. We watch the news, we wash our hands, we try to take every precaution. We go on with our lives, but we never get over the uneasy feeling that something is prowling around out there. Something dangerous to those we love. In times like this, we may wish that faith was magic, that we had some incantation or amulet that would protect us. But faith resides within reality, within our fragile bodies that are susceptible to disease. There will be an inoculation one day soon, but in the meantime, it takes a lot of courage to do what we are doing. We are facing reality with reality. The virus is strong, but so is our determination to face it. We will be agents of hope in these dark days of waiting. We will help others to prepare. We will share good information and ideas. We will exercise our common sense and our intelligence. And we will do one thing more. We will pray. Not because we believe prayer is magic, but because we know prayer is courage. It is the voice of a people who will not give up, run away, or hide in denial. It is the voice of hope against the whispers of fear. Yes, it takes a lot of courage to do what we are doing, and it will take a lot of prayer. But we are doing it, and we will go on doing it until this tide of shadows is forced to withdraw and our families are safe once more. In this community, open to every person of every walk of life, we stand our ground. We stand together in faith and in prayer. We stand in courage to witness to a power greater than the virus will ever be.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here today with us at Worship with Bravery. I am so glad to um, welcome today our special, very special guest is Ahmed Anzaldua. Ahmed, welcome to Worship with Bravery.
Hi, Yuri. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. And the first thing that we would like to know is who is Ahmed? Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you're doing, how long you've been in the United States. What's a little bit of your story?
Well, I was born in Mexico. I am originally from northern Mexico, but my mother was an Egyptian immigrant in Mexico. So that's why my name's Ahmed, but my name's Ahmed Fernando. My dad's Mexican. I grew up playing piano and trumpet, and I came to the United States in 2012 to Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I got my degree there in choral conducting, in piano first, and then in choral conducting. I just fell in love with choral conducting. I've worked with singers all my life, and I just dove into it. And 3 years ago, I came to the Twin Cities to get a doctorate at the University of Minnesota in choral conducting. And while I was here, I founded a professional choral ensemble named Broder CrosSing. And I started as a director of music ministries at Unity Church Unitarian here in St. Paul, Minnesota.
That's fantastic. And that is one of the reasons why I wanted to invite you to Worship with Bravery, because I consider you to be one of the bravest musicians I've ever met. Although we haven't really met uh, personally, but I admire your work, and I know we have many colleagues in common, and I try to follow your videos and the work of your choirs. Um, Tell us a little bit about the mission statement of Border Crossing.
Well, it essentially started with me trying to bring a little bit of my home and my background to the United States. I wasn't seeing Latin American music presented the way I thought it should be presented, and so I got some friends together to perform it. But eventually, we kind of realized that it was a little bit, it was about more than just Latin American music. It was about sort of tackling the sorts of systemic issues in our field that were resulting in my culture not being represented. So, our mission is to integrate a field that has been historically segregated and to do so through the performance of choral music. And that's just a very broad
Yeah.
mission, but we are basically trying to effect a change to the choral music field where it is better reflective of the cultural reality of our society, of who we actually are.
And tell us a little bit of how that translates into the work that you do with your choir, for instance, in a performance last year.
Well, we do a lot of a lot of things, but our main project is called Puentes, which is a year-long season, and the way Puentes works is that it is very intentional about exploring Latin American culture, always in collaboration with Latin American artists, happening in places where there is a large Latin American community in place, and we and then it's never about a single concert. So we try to tell a story and through a concert, and then connect it to other things happening. So community singing events, or other things going on that might not be us, but to just kind of give a wider range. So, for example, 2 years ago, we did a concert called that was centered around the story of the St. Patrick's Battalion. So the St. Patrick's Battalion was a group of soldiers from Ireland that fought in the Mexican-American War. So we did a concert where we blended and fused music from the United States from that period, from Ireland, from Mexico. We had like an Irish flute player playing with a son jarocho group. So
Wow.
so we did this whole thing where we were telling a story about this specific historical period, and at the same time, it was telling stories about immigration, parallels between Irish immigrants 200 years ago and Latin American immigrants now, shared points of view, like Catholic faith and some things like that. But then we had 2 community singing events where people learned traditional Irish music and traditional Mexican music, and then the whole group went out and performed at the St. Patrick's Day celebration for the Irish community, and then we did it at Our Lady of Guadalupe Church where all the Mexican community. So it was this whole bunch of things that kind of connected to this story as a way to find shared culture, shared ideas.
Absolutely. I truly believe that when you start sharing your stories, the more and more you realize that you have more in common with other people than you think.
I agree.
And I love the name of your concert series, Puentes. Puentes means bridges. What a great concept, and what a great way to realize it. That's fantastic. I want to ask you, one of your performances last year, if I'm not wrong, was the Gollyhoff Mass, the Osvaldo Gollyhoff Passion.
Yeah, La Pasión según San Marcos.
La Pasión, which is, I mean, that's a piece of sacred music. Do you consider that sacred music?
Yeah.
Yeah,
completely.
absolutely. Yeah, the text is all from the St. Matthew's Passion. Gollyhoff finished that in the year 2000. It was commissioned by the Bach Institute, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, the Organ Bach Festival and the
Right.
Bach Academy in Stuttgart. Yeah, it was it was a pinnacle experience for the whole group and for me, and we all just I mean we all think of it as one of the most amazing things we've done. Yeah, the way it happened, so. it's just a piece like no other. It is just this enormous passion story, but it tells the entire story of the passion through the lens of Latin America, and on the topic of bravery. The central concept of La Pasión is that Latin American people, through having had the history that they have, their faith and the idea of them being so faithful in general as a community is an extraordinary act of bravery, and that is of courage, and that is the thread through the piece. So what happened was that last year the Minnesota Orchestra was putting together a summer program centered on Latin American music, and we had been performing Latin American music here through our Puente series for 2 years by then. So they approached us and asked us if we could be the choir for their performance of La Pasión, and Maria Guinand was coming to direct it because the work is dedicated to her and her choir, La Scola. So 25 of her singers were going to come from Venezuela and join my 25 singers for this performance. And then things exploded in Venezuela. Just the whole situation deteriorated. So ultimately, only 9 of them were able to come because their visas were canceled or they weren't able to get any. So we scrambled. We collaborated with the Minnesota Chorale and filled up our roster, and it ended up being a performance of La Pasión, which had 42 people that had never done it, that were not from La Scola. So this ended up being the first time that a choir that was not La Scola or made up almost entirely of La Scola performed this piece. So it was just very moving for us, for Osvaldo, for Maria. It was all just a landmark. I think one of the just most incredible experiences.
Absolutely. I think just thinking for a producer or for an artistic director, just thinking about the forces that you need to bring together, plus the language, plus the different rhythms and musics that you're representing, it's got to be daunting. Just thinking about that. How did you overcome that?
It was a lot of work, and the singers just worked like so much. I mean, they were so fully invested, and also the fact that we were we were all of a sudden on our own, let's say, doing it because kind of representing the singers from La Scola who couldn't be here, also served as a way to really motivate the local singers to make sure that we honored their work and the piece. But like you said, I mean, this piece has a triple choir, an orchestra, plus a what he calls La Pasión Orchestra, which is like a salsa band with, and then a percussion section that is just as large as the choir, dancers, soloists, choreography. The choir has to be memorized because they have to move. It is just on every level. It is probably, I consider it so far just the greatest work of the 21st century for choir. It's just my favorite piece.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. I love it. That's fantastic. Um, Congratulations. I heard it was a great success. I know I had some singers here from Christchurch Cathedral, Indianapolis, who sing with me. They were part of the choir, and they just said how fabulous that is. Um, Now, my singers, they're not Spanish speakers. They're American. What do you think it takes for a person who is not familiar with the language or with the rhythms to say, yes, I can do this?
It takes some work, and you need someone that is very familiar with it to show you, to help you through it. And there's a lot of trial and error. I think nothing beats having a good example with you live. I know that I was only able to get the choir up to a certain level, and we couldn't get past that sort of threshold. And then we added in those 9 singers from Venezuela, and it just transformed everything. And it was just, I mean, nine out of 51 singers, but it sounded like all of a sudden every single person there was singing much better and connecting better because they were hearing the example of how the Spanish is supposed to be spoken, how you invest into the rhythms and the, I mean, even the way you count it. I mean, so half the time when you asked one of the local singers to tap the rhythm, to tap the beat, they would just tap 1, 2, 3, 4, and the Venezuelan singers were tapping the clave pattern, pa pa
Yeah.
pa pa, the whole time. So things like that. Just I think being immersed and collaborating with other people is really the best way to approach that sort of I don't know, best practice, best way of doing it.
Yes, I absolutely. I agree. Um, while you were talking about having singers, uh, the singers from Venezuela come and be that live example, and then all of a sudden everybody just stepped up. It made me think of something that happened here at a much smaller and humble level. Here in my choir, because of the coronavirus, we stopped um, presential rehearsals with physical presence. So we've been doing Zoom meetings, and we started recording videos and doing the virtual choir thing. And the first time that I asked them to record something, it took my community singers, my volunteers, who are all amateur but very committed. It took them about 2 weeks to totally decide, say, okay, I'm going to do this. They were telling me how this was daunting because they were afraid of listening to themselves, because they were afraid of not being around anybody else, and they had to listen to a recording, even though I was on a video conducting them and everything. But then when they saw the final result, bringing everybody together, it really sounded like it stepped up. And I kept telling them, it this is not una carga for yourself. This is not something you're going to carry on your own. This is going to be something that we're all going to share. This work, this task is going to be shared by all, and the result is going to be the product of all our efforts. And truly, they didn't believe me until they saw it. And I almost had to convince some of them to really go ahead and do it and trust themselves. Um, so I kind of reminding me of that. in your choirs that you work with, do you have all professionals or do you work with professionals and community singers?
It depends. So with Border Crossing, we have the professional ensemble, and that's a full group of professionals. And sometimes we combine with the Minnesota Chorale, which is a mixed group with professional section leaders and non-professional singers, but they're auditioned. We so something that happened now with the coronavirus is that we were in September. We're going to launch our amateur community chorus. Um,
Oh,
and now we have to wait. So that was the next step. I really believed for Border Crossing that I wanted to start with a professional group to just really showcase and make people just realize how much incredible art they're missing. And to do that, I just thought we need professionals to really do it justice. But then our next step was to start this community chorus that would start kind of feeding into everything else. So that will have to be delayed, but we know it'll happen eventually. And at my church job, I have at Unity Church, I have 4 adult choirs and 1 children's choir, and they're all they're all amateurs. They're all I do have an audition group there, some very advanced singers and some paid section leaders in the largest group, but a big mix of abilities overall.
that's awesome. So now that you're talking about your church choirs, um, do you guys do what kind of music do you do? Do you combine sometimes languages, cultures inside the music for worship?
That's been something I've done a lot since I started, or I'm trying to do. Unity Church has a very explicit end statement where they want to become a multicultural uh, um, worship home. So they have been very explicit about about that sort of work. So generally, I do know that they sing in I generally try to make sure that they're singing in languages other than English, apart from English, that they also do other languages. And because of the nature of, Unitarian Universalism and all that, I do have a lot of freedom to sort of bring music from different faith traditions and different cultures into one place. So that's been something I enjoy about that place. Is really a good fit for me there.
I'm so glad to hear that. And how do the congregations receive that?
They are enthusiastic about it. I mean, it's always mixed, and I will say that sometimes some things land better than others.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, but but uh, but some things. But I think that overall, they've really liked the things we do. It's tricky when you're a church music director. Sometimes you have to push back a little bit about consumerist mentality, about people in a congregation trying to consume music as if it were a concert, or like, well, I I thought this was out of tune. I didn't enjoy this experience. Because a lot of the time the music that we do isn't so much about a product that we're presenting, but about a community singing experience or a shared sort of a way in which we share an idea with each other. Or so it's there's a lot to navigate, and it's interesting, and sometimes it gets me very annoyed, and sometimes I'm very happy, and I'm sure you can relate.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Christ Church is in Indianapolis is also very intentional about being multicultural and inclusive and diverse. But definitely there are some really, really good days and some days where you just wonder what could have been different. But in general, it's always a huge learning experience, and we love it. Um, I am wondering, what do you think about in the times where we are right now? What is our role, as choir directors or music leaders in the middle of this pandemic? What do you think it's that we're being called to?
You know, I've been thinking about that. It's because this is such a roller coaster. So it just emotionally, and in terms of finding motivation to do things, some days it's we are going through a shared period of trauma of so it goes up and down, and so I think that our role right now is to hold our music communities together, to and for some people that might mean that they just don't have room in their life for Zoom choir rehearsals, and for other people it might mean that they need you to constantly check up on them and give them things to do, and or so. But I guess that the very basic role is hold those choir communities together, or those congregations together, and just keep them realizing that they're there for each other, and that we're still here, and that when this is all over, we're still going to be here for each other. Don't let them just kind of stray away. And that's been my priority, and my other priority has been to make sure that that I'm taking care of everyone that I have the ability to take care for. So I have a staff of professional musicians at Unity. I have my professional musicians and staff at Broder CrosSing, and my priority has been keep them employed, make sure that they've got the things they need, don't just abandon them if our budget shrinks, So that's been my priority right now.
Absolutely. Well, they are very, very blessed to have you there as a leader. I'm so glad to hear about your efforts to keep them together. That's wonderful. I have one last question. And since we're talking about bravery in the midst of worship, I think most of the bravery that we bring to worship, we bring it with our stories, the stories of our peoples and our own personal stories. And I wonder if it's okay with you. I wonder if you could share a story about bravery that that you could share with us.
I think that any sort of performing in public and making music is, you're making yourself vulnerable. That's for me. I think the more, just thinking back about recent things of bravery, I'm always thinking about the small things, the little details where I know someone did something that they didn't think they were capable of doing. Or so, for example, last fall, I began making room for some of the teenagers at my church to play music during the services, in front of which all of a sudden means you're playing for 400 people, and all of them are listening very intently. And so I remember one cellist. She was extremely nervous. She was shaking. She couldn't think she could do it. She's about 15 years old. She was scared, but she worked, and then there was a worship service, and she played a sonata in front of everyone with me on the organ, and she was so proud afterward, and her family was so happy. And that's the sort of thing that just makes me think of bravery as connected to music.
Absolutely. And Ahmed, I know that you're going to share in this program today with us. You're going to share some music with us, right?
I'm happy to share music. Yes.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about what we and our guests are going to be listening to today.
Well, there are some samples from Broder CrosSing's last performances. I wish I could show some of La Pasión, but that one is Minnesota Orchestra. There's little clips of that online, but there is one movement from La Pasión that we've recorded and that we've performed, and it speaks very, very centrally to the idea of bravery. So it's called Demos Gracias, a Dios. Let us give thanks to God. But and it is movement 15 from La Pasión, and it is the central movement of La Pasión. And what Golikov did is that he took different psalm texts and created this piece out of the psalm texts. And the psalms are, the essential idea is we give thanks in the face of death, we give thanks in the face of hardship, we give thanks in the face of the earthquake. And so but what really makes the piece powerful, I think, apart from it being like in a pivotal moment, La Pasión, is that it is a series of variations on the song Todavía Cantamos by Victor Heredia. So during the Argentine dictatorship, people are disappearing. Tens of thousands of people. There weren't like public executions. It was just one day just disappear. And so, a mother would find that her child was gone all of a sudden, or her husband. And so they started to be called the mothers of la Plaza de Mayo, las madres de la Plaza de Mayo, because they started protesting in front of the government plaza, standing in front, asking for what happened to our loved ones. And this got a lot of attention, and this sort of the courage behind that to just go there and protest as this group of women in a society that was repressive and violent. That was an extraordinary act of bravery. So Victor Heredia wrote a song that tells the story called Todavía Cantamos, we still sing, in the face of this hardship. And so Golikov took this melody in the version by Mercedes Sosa and started creating this series of choral variations on it. So there's this whole context about bravery. And that is also the central message of that the whole La Pasión, that the faith itself, the ability to give thanks, requires an act of courage and bravery. So, and what we did for our performance is that we sang Victor Heredia's song, and then just kind of so it's like presenting the theme of the variations. And then we just go right into Todavía Demos Gracias, and you hear them one next to the other, and then it really clicks where that came from and what it means.
Wow, I didn't know that about that movement of the Pasión. I'm blown away, and I'm never gonna hear it again the same. Wow.
Well, yeah, the original is Todavía cantamos, todavía soñamos, todavía. And Golikov's is Demos gracias a Dios, demos gracias a Dios. So he starts taking that little melody and turning it into the psalm.
Wow. That's
La
fantastic.
Pasión is full of Easter eggs like that. When you love Latin American music, you start listening to La Pasión, and all of a sudden you hear all these songs from all over the continent. From Brazil and Cuba and Argentina, and the original song where he took the idea from gives context, gives you a sort of that's something I love about that piece, how it's so strongly connected to the culture of Latin America, and also in a way that makes the listener want to find out more and learn more. It's just an extraordinary piece.
Absolutely. Well, and now we're going to leave all our audience and friends who are listening to Worship with Bravery today. We're going to let them listen to this wonderful music from Broder CrosSing. And before that, I want to say thank you so much for being with us today, Ahmed.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And God bless you, and God bless your work. And nos vemos al final de todo esto. We're going to see each other, at the end of all this.
I'm sure.
Yes. Okay.
In the power of the Spirit and in union with Christ, let us pray.
O God, the creator and preserver of all, we pray for people in every kind of need. Make your ways known on earth, your saving health among all nations. We pray for your church. Guide and govern us by your good spirit, that all who profess your name may be led into the way of truth and hold the faith in unity of spirit, in the bond of peace and love. We commend to your goodness all those who are in any ways afflicted or distressed, in mind, body, or state. Comfort and relieve them in their need. Give them patience in their sufferings, and bring good out of all their afflictions. We remember those who have gone before us in the peace of Christ, and we give you praise for all your faithful ones, with whom we rejoice in the communion of saints. O Lord, hear our prayer. O Lord, hear our prayer. When we call, answer us. O Lord, hear our prayer. O Lord, hear our prayer. Come and listen to us. O Lord, hear our prayer. O Lord, hear our prayer. When we call, answer us. O Lord, hear our prayer. O Lord, hear our prayer. Come and listen to us.
Aleluya, Cristo resucitó de madrugada el domingo. Aleluya, Cristo resucitó de madrugada el domingo. Run, faithful women, to the graveside. Marvel, the stone is rolled away. Hear from the angel, he is risen. Christ goes before you on the way. Aleluya, Cristo resucitó de madrugada el domingo. Aleluya, Cristo resucitó de madrugada el domingo. Fueron mujeres al sepulcro, la piedra un ángel removió. Les dijo, ha resucitado, y al irse le salió el Señor. Aleluya, Cristo resucitó de madrugada el domingo. Aleluya, Cristo resucitó de madrugada el domingo.
Rise, Magdalena, from your weeping. Christ stands before your very eyes. Quickly return to the disciples.